The setup for the trophy presentation is now underway. That will be happening in just a few minutes.
Aryna Sabalenka simply entered an unexpected nightmare. The FBI is circulating screenshots of the tennis powerhouse, who is currently embroiled in grave accusations of unethical behavior and unscrupulous techniques. Tennis officials are no longer able to overlook the growing number of accusations. What began as rumors of dubious courtroom behavior has grown into a major scandal that might ruin everything Sabalenka established. Whether she went too far is not the question that everyone is asking. It's if she will be able to withstand what follows. This is what I would like to know. Do you believe that elite athletes get away with actions that would result in suspension for others? Let's go back to the beginning of this catastrophe. Because no one decides to ruin their entire career over a tennis match when they wake up one morning. It took some time for this scenario to blow out. It developed quietly and slowly in that perilous area between hubris and confidence where champions occasionally get lost. For years, Aryna Sabalenka had worked to establish herself as one of the most formidable players in women's tennis. The kind of energy that made opponents uneasy before they even set foot on the court, raw power and mental tenacity. She was doing more than simply winning fights. She was controlling them. Crushing hopes with ground strokes that left opponents reeling and serves that sounded like gunfire. Her ascent to the top seemed obvious, even organic, like witnessing a natural force take its proper position. Here's the problem with remaining at the top though. You get paranoid as a result. Suddenly, every young athlete appears to be a danger. Every grievance feels intimate. Every setback seems like the start of the end. And once you've made being the most formidable player in the room your whole persona, you start going to any lengths to uphold that perception. The Filipino phenomenon Alexandra Yala, who wasn't expected to cause trouble at this early stage, enters the picture. Before challenging the status quo, she was expected to learn, grow, and pay her dues for a few years. However, Yala never received that memo. Her wild enthusiasm made veterans uneasy as she blasted through competitions. There was no hesitation, no respect for reputation, simply the conviction that she was one of the best. And people like Sabalenka were shaken by that notion. Dramatic confrontations or public feuds were not the first signs of stress between them. Small instances that fans recognized but were unable to fully articulate were the beginning of it. The handshake was too brief by half a second. Every time Isla's name was mentioned, her body language screamed displeasure and her response at the press conference felt colder than required. Nothing overt enough to draw attention to, but enough to raise questions about if something more profound was going on. Then their match, the one that would alter everything, arrived. As soon as they entered the court, the mood felt off. With her shoulders taut and her jaw clenched, Sabalenka approached with that well-known stone-faced intensity that suggested she was getting ready for battle rather than a tennis play. With a carefree smile, Ella skipped in, eager to show that she belonged. It was almost unpleasant to observe the sharp contrast. The opening set went rather smoothly. Precision against power. Hunger versus experience. Two entirely distinct styles merging. However, in the second set, something changed. Something that would subsequently lead to charges, inquiries, and a public relations disaster that Sabalenka's team is still trying to quell. Sabalenka began extending her preserve routine, bouncing the ball 15, 16, and 17 times while making Isla wait by moving slowly and methodically to her towel. It initially appeared to be typical gamesmanship, the type of rhythm disruption experienced players employ to confuse younger players. However, it continued to get worse. The intervals lengthened. It got chilly on the stairs. The timing seemed too deliberate to be accidental. Then, in the middle of the demonstration, came the moment that threw social media into frenzy. Sabalenka grunted in a way that seemed out of step with the play. Just as Ella was about to make contact, not during her own shot. A brief interruption that might have been unintentional. However, 2 points later, it occurred once more. Yella's body language abruptly shifted though. Confusion, annoyance, the evident tightness of someone trying to stay composed while feeling purposely unsettled. At last, Yala extended her hand to the chair umpire. It was a non-aggressive, non-dramatic gesture that conveyed the idea that something wasn't quite right. The crowd began to mutter as the umpire nodded and gave a gentle warning about the speed of play. When cameras captured Sabalenka's response, that murmur grew into something more. In slow-motion playback, a quick, slight, but unmistakable smirk. "I know exactly what I'm doing," is the kind of expression. At that point, the game shifted from being about tennis to something much more repulsive. Social media didn't wait for formal declarations or inquiries. Within minutes, videos of unsportsmanlike behavior and dirty techniques were making the rounds with subtitles. Filipino supporters, tennis enthusiasts, and casual onlookers. Everybody had an opinion, and the majority of them were negative regarding Sabalenka. The delayed serve was visible from one perspective. The misdirected grunt was captured by another. A third froze on the sneer that would come to represent the dispute. However, this is when the narrative becomes more sinister. The turn that resulted in FBI accusations. Because there was audio in all those widely shared videos that, according to supporters, caught something much worse than gamesmanship. During a changeover, Sabalenka is said to have said something beneath her breath into a courtside microphone. Something that sounded unsettlingly like Yalla was the target of a racial insult. The audio quality was awful, it was distorted, ambiguous, and susceptible to interpretation. Online viewers, however, don't wait for clarification. They make decisions based on emotion and context. Additionally, individuals filled in the blanks with the worst possible meaning because of everything else that occurred throughout that match. Suddenly, this was more than merely dubious strategies. This concerned possible hate speech from one of the biggest names in sports. Almost immediately, there were similarities to Coco Gauff. In an effort to find evidence that Sabalenka had a history of treating opponents of color differently, fans started poring over historical film. After losing to Gauff, they discovered a tight handshake. Sabalenka became contemptuous during a news conference when questioned about up-and-coming Asian and black athletes. Moments that, while seemingly benign at the time, now appeared suspect when viewed through the prism of popular indignation. It didn't matter if any of this was genuine proof of racial bias. The story had developed, solidified, and proliferated more quickly than any formal inquiry could keep up. Hashtags took off. Hashtag Stand with Yalla was popular in several nations. Despite being founded on accusations rather than verified facts, Investigate Sabalenka acquired popularity. Regarding the evaluation of video for possible sportsmanship infractions, tennis authorities released ambiguous statements, steering clear of details but taking no action to defuse the situation. The FBI angle then surfaced, the allegation that turned this from a sports issue into a possible federal case. Rumors circulated on social media and tennis forums that someone had officially complained to the FBI about Sabalenka's reported insults, alleging they were hate speech that went too far. Nobody was confident whether the FBI was indeed looking into this complaint, whether it had any legal merit, or whether any of this would lead to charges. However, the tennis community was shocked by the mere notion that federal officials would be involved. Sabalenka's group entered a state of emergency. Her social media accounts are silent. No press conferences. Nothing more than a succinct lawyered response that was meaningless. That quiet was meant to stop more harm. Instead, it made her appear guilty in the eyes of the public. People assume the worst when you are accused of something so serious and you remain silent. Yalla, meanwhile, managed the circumstance with amazing poise. She shared a single straightforward message. Respect is a component of the game. I hope everyone keeps it in mind. 8 words that conveyed both everything and nothing. Acknowledging the debate without contributing to it. Preserving her dignity without disparaging her accuser. In contrast, Sabalenka's quiet was rendered much worse by the response. Former players offered their opinions. Divided between those advocating for accountability and those preserving competitive intensity. Every frame of the game was examined by commentators. The possibility of federal charges for alleged on-court slurs was discussed by legal experts. For weeks, the story dominated tennis coverage, taking precedence over competitions, rankings, and other sport-related events. The confluence of several problems was what made this situation very hazardous. Unsportsmanlike behavior contra gamesmanship. Respect for young stars versus veteran privilege. Racial dynamics in a sport with a large white population. Social media has the ability to convict before any formal investigation is finished. A fire that showed no signs of going out was fueled by every angle. Eventually, Sabalenka started competing again. She was unique, though. Careful restraint had taken the place of the swagger. Her preserve procedures became noticeably shorter. The fierce stare-downs subsided. Nobody could say with certainty whether this was intentional image rehabilitation or real change, but anyone who paid attention could see the change. If the FBI inquiry ever took place outside of online rumors, no public charges were ever brought. Tennis officials examined the video, made general remarks about the standards for sportsmanship, then discreetly ended the case without making any conclusions or imposing any sanctions. However, the harm had already been done. No amount of victory could fully restore Sabalenka's damaged reputation. Yala, on the other hand, gained more credibility after the issue. Among younger players, her ability to remain composed under duress became legendary. Her refusal to participate in mudslinging while defending herself turned into a lesson on overcoming hardship. Not only did she make it through the ordeal, but she also used it as a platform to raise her fame over what any tournament win could have accomplished. Months later, trends in the officiating of Sabalenka matches began to emerge, which was the truly fascinating aspect. Pace of play infractions appeared to be more closely monitored by umpires. Time infractions were punished more severely. Whether this was genuine prejudice against her or merely increased awareness on the part of officials concerned about another controversy. As a result, Sabalenka found herself playing under greater scrutiny than in the past. She deserves it, according to some fans. The character defects that needed to be addressed were exposed by the dispute. Some said that she was being unfairly singled out and that her career was being defined by a single poor match. As always, the reality most likely existed somewhere in the complex center where people make mistakes, deal with the fallout, and perhaps grow from them. There is no denying that the episode altered discussions regarding professional tennis behavior. The debate between crossing borders and gamesmanship became increasingly complex. Whispered observations on racial dynamics in the sport gave way to candid discussions. It became hard to ignore social media's ability to demand accountability and shape narratives. For Sabalenka, winning games was not enough to move further. Rebuilding trust needed proving that the behavior in that match was an exception rather than a pattern through deeds rather than words. She would never be forgiven by certain people. The instant those videos became viral, their thoughts were made up. While most would watch and wait, letting time and behavior dictate their judgment, some would give her the benefit of the doubt because they believed in forgiveness and second chances. Whether genuine or not, the purported FBI inquiry signified more than just one player's legal issues. It represented a change in society where athletes' actions on the court are scrutinized in ways that earlier generations were not. Stars could no longer conduct as they pleased with little repercussion, replaced by a time where public responsibility arrived quickly. This narrative demonstrates how your reputation in contemporary sports can deteriorate more quickly than it can be restored. Sabalenka discovered the hard way that passion without decency makes foes rather than heroes. Yella demonstrated to us that poise under duress speaks louder than any retaliation. Public opinion creates the story that accompanies you forever, but the court will always be the ultimate arbiter. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons if you thought my analysis was helpful so you won't miss the controversy that everyone is discussing.